Welcome to the Legion Vodcast, where we talk about the events and film industry and how to navigate it and how to be successful in it. My name is Danny Burke. I'm your host, and I'm the director of events at Legion AVS and one of the co-founders of Legion. And again, I have Mark here with me. Again, Mark is the director of business development, and he's also an event producer and
do many things.
Yeah, you wear a lot of hats when you own a business. Today's episode is kind of a little bit more geared towards event planners, and whether you're an event planner for an agency or for a large company. We wanted to talk about conferences and content at conferences and how that's kind of changed over the course of our careers and now like post-pandemic. So like keynote speeches and speakers and versus breakouts versus fireside chats versus words versus panel discussions. There it is. So what do attendees like? What do they not like? I think that this is such a huge part of a conference, no matter what the conference topic is like, you want to be creating valuable content. You want to be providing value to your attendees, whatever that topic is. We just want to talk about trends we've been seeing, and then discuss kind of what we think makes good content versus not so good content, and how these conferences are laying themselves out. So to start, I'm going to say, let's just start with like the meat and potatoes of conferences being keynote speakers. What in your mind makes a great keynote speaker?
I mean, it all comes down to the content and its delivery. I think and obviously the content is important, but the content being important to the audience that you're speaking to.
So like relevancy,
and like their ability to know their audience in terms of like their, I don't want to say IQ level, but like in terms of their status, right? Like, for instance, we do the Vistage conferences, right? You can't go in to the Vistage conference and give a business 101 talk, right? You can't talk to them. Like, for some people in the room, there's a lot of value in it, but you also like, you want to know your audience and be able to elevate their experience. And part of that is knowing what their experience level is. So definitely like on the content aspect, like making sure that you are either having people think differently, or you are elevating common knowledge in a meaningful way to the audience that you're presenting to.
Yeah. So I would say you're saying this as if you are the speaker, but to me, this is like if you're booking the speaker, make sure. Yeah. So if you're presenting to Visage, which is all CEOs and business owners, you don't necessarily want to be saying, how to form an LLC. Totally. That's so. Yeah. I mean, I would say as an event planner, if you're, what you're doing, so you have to vet your speaker, and then you also have to. I would say you have to educate your speaker on who they're talking to, right? So you have to actually probably have a pretty solid document of, hey, here's your audience. This is who you're talking to, and so like make sure that you're tailoring your talk to this.
Yeah, and that tailoring group, I think, is the biggest part, because a lot of times they'll send over their slides and their presentation notes and all that stuff, and taking the time. I mean, we spend a lot of time doing rehearsals where like the event planner will be going through it with the keynote, and I think that is necessary, because I mean, like I said, tailoring it is what makes it special, right? And you want to be giving out extra nuggets of information that are directly associated to that audience. Doing the same exact speech, while there can be a ton of value out of it, it can only go so far. Whereas like if you've taken the time to have a basic understanding of who's in the room and ways that you can better reach and interact that audience, you're going to get much better results, and the audience is going to remember you a lot more.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It makes me think about like virtual events during the pandemic, and like how like engagement was so important. And so being able to have our speakers and things like that be able to engage with the audience and like let them know that, hey, this isn't just a recording, right? Like this isn't just like a thing that I say the same thing every single time. You know, I have thought about who I'm talking to, and they would definitely, you know, we would have speakers come in and watch the presentation, so that they could then like refer back to something else to, again, just to make it feel more, you know, like they're engaged and they are part of the audience.
That makes me think like dynamic. Dynamic is the term that I'm going for, but in that sense, like what you're providing shouldn't be able to be done in a video, right? Like, I mean, you could just create one video that has the same thing and pump that out. That's a very good use for a video. But when you go to that audience, you want to have it be more than just your standard. You want to be engaging, especially with the audience. And part of that's knowing and understanding who your audience is, and being open to, you know, bringing in elements that maybe are not in your control, like that element of surprise, kind of like when you bring in audience for engagements, you never know what you're going to get. And like that also leads to like, it's kind of like with live sports, right? You don't know the outcome.
Improvisation.
And so like, I think that is a very important aspect to it. Otherwise, like you said, like if I can get the same value out of watching it on YouTube, then like, why am I in the room?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. All right. So, you know, vet your speakers, make sure your speakers know who they're talking to. I think that's pretty standard. Who their audience is. What about like, so something I've been seeing lately is less, general session and more, like breakouts and networking time. And, it seems like, and I don't know if this is like post-pandemic, but it seems like people want to sit and watch less and they want to engage more. So do you think there's a good, like, what do you think like the best balance of, because like for me, conferences are really about content, and networking. I'd say those are the two things, content and networking. So what is the best balance? Is it like general session in the morning and then a big networking thing and then like another session, or?
Well, and I think it even further than content and networking, it's the engagement portion. Like, and so like when you bring that up, I think that the reason you're seeing it skew that way is because that's where you can most have those like intimate engagements.
Yeah.
Because like when you break it down to smaller groups, it gives everybody a platform in the room to be providing value. And like, I mean, as a member of EO, like the big push there is that most of the time, whoever the presenter is isn't like the person you get the most value from. It's the experience shares around it. So like you can get a ripple effect from one person, you know, sharing their thoughts or ideas on a certain subject that then triggers a bunch of different things in the room, and you're capturing that essentially that ripple effect, and you're getting way more value out of it as opposed to one person talking to you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
it's, yeah, I think I agree. I would say, for me, it seems like it's probably like 1 to 2 a day of like a thought-provoking talk, like keynote speaker or something. And then, you know, after that keynote speaker, have some unstructured or lightly structured networking time so people can talk about what they just listened to. Yeah, because that's super valuable.
And I think the activity portion too, I've seen that roll out more and more, where like they'll have either a creative activity or like table activities are big after, like especially around like creative keynotes and things like that. Like you could do a really cool, you know, activity associated, which like that's the stuff you can't do by watching a video.
Yeah.
Right?
And I wrote that down as a thing, is structured versus unstructured networking.
Yeah.
Because like a table activity is structured networking. That is forcing you to engage with the people around you, to learn about them and you know, maybe and network. So I think there is a lot of value there.
I feel like when you look at any poll about an event, like mostly everyone I go to, they talk about how the value is in the network there. there's always value in the keynotes, but I do think that shift from like I went there to see this person shifts to I went there and got to experience the keynote with this table, and then we all had a really interesting conversation, and I took this from it, but Carol, she had this totally different set of ideas that stem from it, and I thought that was very interesting. And I think that like synergy or like that process right there is where people get the most value out of live events. Like I said, like stepping away from the like I went there to consume information. We have so many platforms to consume information that are a lot easier than flying out to a 3-day conference. Let's be clear on that. So when you look at it, you want to be looking at how do you leverage, you just brought 300, 1,000, however many people to this one space. That in its own is a huge aspect. And so how do you leverage getting the most value out of all those people in one space? And it's not typically around like, it's not just around that keynote content. It's what you do with it with the audience.
That's a good, honestly, it's what I'm thinking now is like the keynote and like the keynote speeches and like a lot of the content is to give energy to the audience. It's to get people excited. It's to give them energy to take that energy and go do what they're going to do, whatever that is. There's a million conferences. So that's kind of like you get energy from going to the conference, and that's like a kind of a ephemeral thing, right? Like you come home, you're super energized, you're super motivated to do stuff, but the value in addition to the energy is one piece of value, but the other value is that you networked, you got new ideas, you met new people, you potentially made some business connections, whatever it is. So it's energy, and then it's this like these action items from attending that you got from meeting people and things. So and then you have the energy and excitement to continue it.
And like another part of that, and you brought it up, is like fireside chats and panels are becoming bigger and bigger. And I think because like when people go there, they really want the value to, outside of that networking value, like they want to be hearing from people that like they can associate more with. And by having a panel, and typically panels are made up of, a number of different industries or whatever it is. So you get a broader view, a broader, group of thoughts. I think that just allows more people to relate to the information. You're going to get more nuggets out of it, as opposed to, let's say, like, for instance, this CPA talking, right? And he's very about the books. Half the room is in marketing or sales. There's some things that correlate, but like as opposed to if you have a panel of very differentiated people asking similar questions about an industry, you're going to get totally different viewpoints, and those different viewpoints, like that brings a lot of value, because that's the other thing, like even when a conference is industry focused, you have so many different aspects of the company. I look at like the events industry events that I go to. God, like even just the drop down menu of like select your category is wild to me. There's a million things and things I don't even think about that are a type of business in this industry. So
that's another one that it wasn't something I mentioned in the title, but like I think is worth talking about too, is when we talk about structured or unstructured networking, is the capability of event apps these days to do structured networking. And I think that's also underutilized. Like you could very easily set up an app that says, hey, do you want to do some structured networking? If you opt in, then it says like, okay, at this time we have a break. You're going to meet this person at this place, like say, here's your meetup point. You're going to meet 4 people. Yeah. And like, you could definitely lean into the technology there, to create, unique engagement points. And
I see experience. I see it more and more.
It is definitely happening more and more.
It's at like the forefront. I think there's still some resistance to it. Like some people are super into it, and then other people aren't. They're afraid like they're just gonna get like the way that I've
It's data collection, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way that I have like it's worked out is typically that like you can request a meeting or like you like link up with them on the app and then you can be like, oh, like request time to meet with them on there. And what typically ends up happening is like you get requested, but a bunch of people want to sell you. Which like you're there, you know, like it kind of happens that way. But that's just my experience. So I'd love to hear about. I know there's so much event tech going on, so like learning more about that would be cool. Just on the handful, like I haven't seen it done super well.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I have an issue with, every event having its own app. I feel like there needs to be, and I think there are platforms trying to do that, but it's just a little scattershot. Yeah. So in general, I've seen, we talked about a little bit, but I've seen less large presentations, more networking activities, more smaller breakouts, more individual, or like the possibility for individual networking connections. Something we've done recently was a show that had large breakouts, and I personally thought that was interesting because we had 200 people in a breakout room, and like to me that's almost just like a mini general session. Like it doesn't really serve the purpose of a breakout session, and so like if you have a lot of attendees, how do you manage? So I guess like education is the next piece, right? So like that breakout was very educational. It was about, a certain topic and how to navigate it. So the other piece, so it's content we talked about and getting energy, but then it's also education. And how do you break up your education to make it, bite-sized and meaningful? And also something I see that happens is that there are too many breakouts happening at the same time, and I want to hit 3 of them, but they're all at the same time and I can't. So like structuring your content.
And I think something that I would opt that should be a bigger prioritization is like I feel like breakouts become like they just aren't given that much attention.
Very true.
Right. And like whereas like that seems like certain people like large format, and like keynotes are always like the marquee thing, right? Yeah. But like if you spent a modest amount of time trying to individualize and build up the experience in the breakout rooms as opposed to it just being that standard, okay, there's a screen and a speaker. God, that's breakouts. Even when they're done up kind of
that's
polished,
a very,
but
very
like
good point.
That's your opportunity to, you could streamline what types of breakout rooms you have into different themes. And like, I mean, in a simple sense, like think about like, like different lands, like Disneyland, like you have all your Adventureland and I was just there. Actually, but that would be a cool, because like you spend half your time in those and it feels like that's the least produced part.
Definitely the redheaded stepchild. Yeah. Oh, look. 50 feet of black drape and a screen. And
yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, they are definitely, it's almost an afterthought. You often walk into these general sessions that are like, done above and beyond, $1 million productions, 80-foot LED wall, all this flying line array, all this stuff. 100 lights, and then you go into the breakout room and it's like got one Lico lighting the stage.
I think that's hilarious because I do think that you have a diminishing return effect even on keynotes. I mean, you can make the screen bigger. Does that help?
Help?
And then when I think it's funny that then you look at breakouts and they're standardized, and it's like really like you have. That's your opportunity to get like a really cool differentiated environments. Granted, it would be a lot of work, but like, would it?
Yeah, maybe a little design work on the front end, but implementation not too much. And I would also, I'd say it's a good point on the general session of diminishing returns. If you can, again, people are in general sessions less these days because because in general, in my experience, it's like, oh, we're going to do one keynote a day. You're going to be in general session from 9 to noon, and then it's networking and breakouts after that. So like, is your money best spent in a kick-ass general session, or is it better spent on more networking, or more individualized breakout rooms? Or
I think we just revolutionized the industry right now. I really that's just like something that just hit me over the head of like, it feels wrong, because also, like, I mean, not only is it your shortest amount of time, but like for the most part, like I said, most things are, networking is probably 50% as valuable as the content. And if that's the case, why is that not being prioritized in the experience layout when all assets are typically being focused in on the keynote, which is really focused on educational content?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we know what we'll be pitching from now on.
Customized breakouts. Make the whole thing great. All right. Well, I mean, I don't think this is a long discussion, because again, we're kind of on the wrong side of this. We're event producers. We put on the events, right? So we're an event production company. So we're providing the assets and things like that. We often are working with event planners and things, but I would say we don't have the best insight. So this is one where we definitely want to hear from the audience. Maybe we'll have a guest on. I think that would be a really good thing to talk about, is truly somebody who is immersed in the event planning side of the business, to give us kind of their take on it.
Someone that truly cares about the breakouts.
Somebody who truly cares about the breakouts. It is so true, though. I mean, often they're like, oh, we have 8 breakouts, but we don't want to have a person in the breakout with just 2 people manning those 8 breakouts. And it's like, well, you're not going to get a great experience if you have one person between 4 breakout rooms. Like, I do think that breakouts have become, and maybe this is changing again post-pandemic, but they definitely were like an afterthought, and I think they could come back around. So something I've seen, we did a show in Vegas a couple years ago, pre-pandemic, so more than a couple, but pandemic doesn't count. And there was like a party, and it was in a nightclub, and it was absurd, but it was just like people getting smashed, like,
that's
drunk. And so, like, for me personally, like, don't get me wrong, it's nice to let loose and have a good time, but like, I want to have, I guess, more structured networking that's not like, oh, let's go get drunk together. It's like, let's actually talk about, I guess that's like that's a breakout, like, where it's like a very specific, like, hey, we're talking about this, or like maybe it's like a discussion group, or like I don't know. And I mean, this was a sales event, so there's many, many kinds of things. But
I think different paths is good. Options.
Like,
so
having different options for different
because
folks.
I mean, I feel like very much so. The networking kickoff party is
it's a party.
It's a rager, and a lot of the times, like, there's a loud band, and you're like trying to network, and you can't hear anything.
Yeah,
that's every time. Like, I don't even mean a lot of times. So, like, I love that idea of structured networking. Like, it's all kind of coming cohesive with like the breakouts as well. Like, you could do some very good structured networking inside the breakouts if you're making those more dynamic. But like, definitely one aspect that I have seen that is kind of pushing into this is I see more and more like health focused activities. So like a lot of like 5K fun runs, pickleball tournaments. It must be this year's a hot topic, because every event has a pickleball tournament, which, like, bravo pickleball, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
But things like that I think are a cool addition, just because like part of going to events is to have a new experience, right? And like, I feel like events, unfortunately, have kind of merged into an area of the same event every time.
Show up, get checked in, go to a networking party, next day go to a general session, keynote, do breakouts.
I'm like it can only last for so long, until people are going to want more. And there's so many like big disruptive type of companies that are in this space that I feel like there's going to be new ways to go about it. And like certainly for me, like when I look at it, like I would love to go to a totally unconventional like type of conference.
Yeah.
You know, and like I do feel like there's part of it is the way the system was built, you know, like especially with convention halls and things like that's kind of like it's best suited for the people who are at the top because that's the people who are making the most money and they're setting it up that way. But like we've had some open conversations about ballrooms in general not being the best, like not being an optimal space for creativity. And like you could do these events in pretty much like, I mean, you could do them anywhere, right? I mean, it's limited. I mean, they do it out in, what's the one in the desert? I can't think of the
Burning Man?
Yeah. Look at Burning Man is happening in the middle of the desert, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like when I start to think about experience
and the production value there is insane.
It's insane. Yeah. So like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've done concerts in fields. We've done, you know, events where we build a venue from the ground up. Like that's obviously an extreme case, but you know, that is a very unique experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, you know, really good point of like, it has gotten a little bit monotonous. It's very cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I do this, 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 I do this. So what, this is another one where I would ask the audience, you know, like what's a cool out of the box event that you've seen, you know, whether that's a conference or, you know, a pop-up. Pop-ups are something that's been happening more and more. This like that's a kind of another topic, I guess, another conversation. This is conference focused, but what are some cool out of the box conferences you've experienced?
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. And then any ideas around, because I understand, like, especially when you're looking at large crowds, like you are limited in the fact that like people have to be able to get there reasonably. People have to have a place to stay. The facility, like obviously it makes sense if the infrastructure is there to support X amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, like how do we change at least the content, or how do we change the environment inside those boxes to be more dynamic? Like you can change it through the type of content that's being shown, the activities that are being proposed, the layouts of, like we said, the breakouts, like, you know, do breakouts, give them a budget, you know, like do them up individually, have different paths that people can go down, and then have those spaces be a highlight, you know, because that's where they're going to spend most of their time. So I do think there's definitely some disruption to be had in the space. Like I think anybody who attends a lot of conferences sees the same thing, right? And it's unfortunate that it's like I don't see it changing from that too much, right? Like you said, like the big enjoyable part is like the cocktail party where everyone gets wasted. A lot of people really like that. Like, don't get me wrong, but like certain people, eventually you're not getting any additional value out of it.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe there's like, again, this might be a place where like an event app comes in where it's like, you could say, hey, we're all at this conference, the opening party's tonight. Maybe we'll go to that, but then afterwards we're going to do a separate meetup or something, you know, like have the ability for like, you know, like conference attendee networking and messaging and things like that, which I'm sure is fully capable already. Yeah, I could see that, like that type of thing, like more organic networking groups.
Yeah. I think it's really circles around that the value being placed on the network and the value you can derive from that network, and facilitating that aspect more than facilitating the content piece. And I'm, you know, it's very difficult. I don't think it's necessarily an easy thing to do, but it's not easy to put on a keynote effectively either. Right. You know?
Yeah. So none of it's, there's a lot of work that goes into all of these. And I guess we have been talking a little bit about more, I don't know, marketing and sales conferences. I feel like there's also like a big market of like educational conferences that we haven't really touched on. I mean, we have a little bit, but those are a little trickier. I mean, don't get me wrong, networking is important at those as well, but also like those really, you kind of have a format you have to stick to because you have to be teaching these people, right? You have to be getting this information across in a way that is meaningful and that they're actually going to learn things. But I think that's, you know, another example of where breakouts could be plussed up.
This is taking me down a path of like, I wouldn't say it's like, I don't know how to term it, but essentially it's making me think I'll recircle around the idea of saying like that there's probably a reason why this is the case. And like, I can say like, obviously for event spaces and then their vendor providers, PSAV, it is best to have it be cookie cutter. It is best to repeat the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And like kind of honing in on the fact that you're being sold. Like,
yeah,
like that's the reality.
Oh, you're
of
doing
it.
an
Like,
event. Here's
this
200 feet of drape and some big screens and a stage.
And like, I have to believe that, a lot of people, me personally, I'll just speak for me personally. It's always the networking that's the top thing there. And so like, if that's the case, events should be shifting.
Yeah. Curious.
But I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this. This is just like hitting me in the face right now that I'm having the conversation. So I haven't fully thought through that idea and like done any research on it. But like that's how I feel. And like I have a couple events coming up, and like I said, I'm gonna do a pickleball tournament. I'm gonna do that. It'll be fun, and like things like that. I like the multi-track approach. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, have the things for people who want to go get drunk. Have the things for people who want to learn about, do the behind the scenes thing, and have the thing for the fitness people. Like, then you start to build up. You get a lot more engagement from that specific community as opposed to only have a one track where like, your fitness focused people are at the mixer and everyone's getting wasted and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you'll get more traction, and people will want to come again if they're like, oh man, there was something for me, right? Not just like the standard. All right, I'm gonna wrap this one up. I'm gonna say, we are again not the experts in this particular field of the event industry. We work with event planners, we work with event designers, but we're more in the weeds of building the events. So would love your feedback, would love to hear your take on the event industry as a whole. And I hope you enjoyed this episode.
I was going to say, and although we aren't in the weeds of it, we do a lot of events, and I can say a lot of the points that were brought up, I think are very valid. So, I hope that can be a discussion point moving forward of, how do we start to change things?
Yeah. I do think, change the event industry does need a bit of a shakeup. I completely agree. We do put on a lot of events and we attend a lot of events. So,
and like, I'm certain that we didn't just come up with this idea right now. I know people are doing very creative things. So I'd love to see what people are doing in this realm to, focus more on the audience engagement and like different tracks. How do you personalize it? How do you do all those things where it's really focused on their experience as opposed to being plugged into a system that is preset.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Have a good one.